Welcome to WVTC TV Network, capturing family moments in real time, bringing families closer together from the comforts of home. We are unleashing something different to the world. Start your subscription today for the low price of $4.99 per month or $55 annually. Go to www.wvtctvnetwork.com to sign up today. WVTC TV Network is streaming live on 8 different platforms. You can easily download the WVTC TV Network app on the Apple Store, Play Store, Roku, Fire TV, and more. Here at WVTC TV, we have access to movies that everyone can enjoy, including independent films, Sons of a Preacher and a Good Thing, Treasures of Life, the epic drama, The Passion of the Christ, and the box office hit Madagascar Escape to Africa. Remember, go to www.wvtctvnetwork.com and sign up today.
Good afternoon. I am absolutely excited to have you back on my front porch once again on a Wednesday afternoon to talk about some relevant and important issues. I hope that will be informative, transformative, and most of all, inspirational. My special guest today, Dr. E.L. Branch, a veteran pastor who has given a tremendous leadership to a number of exciting and impactful and powerful churches that were life-changing for a whole lot of people in the community where they ministered. He has recently retired, now gives leadership to the E.L. Branch Ministries, and of course, he is the pastor emeritus of a great church in Detroit. And so we're excited to have him as our guest today. Welcome, Dr. Branch. Thank you so much.
It's my pleasure to be here with you, Doc.
Well, for joining me on the porch, the only thing missing today, and I promised to have some, was either a big pitcher of lemonade or a big pitcher of iced tea. But next time you come, I promise.
All right, I want
to have
lemonade,
a chill pitcher of lemonade and iced tea. And of course, for all the saints, it would be unleaded. And so I am excited that you are here with us today. We spent the past few weeks during the celebration of the MLK weekend, of course, for his celebration of his birth and his holiday. We talked about the Birmingham letter, its relevance then, and what impact should it have now. We've talked about that, and since a Black History Month has come in again for us to celebrate, we've been talking about the role of the Black church as we began this week and through the first week in March. That's going to be our discussion. I think it is so important that many people who are a part of the Black church would recognize that the history of African Americans, whether they are religiously oriented or whether they've been raised within the framework of what a lot of people call a conservative environment, a church-going family, that so much of the benefits that are part of the social and political dynamics of the country right now have been sponsored by, nurtured, ushered in by a whole lot of powerful people, the influence of, and most of all, the persistence of the Black church.
Absolutely.
And I believe that has been lost. And so I really wanted to have this conversation because there are a lot of church people who have bought into the dichotomy between church and social action, church and having influence and impact on policy, and the people who legislate the laws that affect our congregations. And so I'm glad you're here because I know you to be a person who is sensitive and interested in how this all plays out. And more than that, you've really been a kind of a leader and a paradigm or a good example for a whole lot of people in ministry about how to balance your participation in the spiritual dimension as well as the human domain, because we're really both.
And we don't get anything to say about that being both, because the fact that we're alive, no matter how much church we do, we got to live in the Word, and we got to bring it all together. And that's one thing that the Black church does, and it does it better than many others. We, as a Black church, the whole thing, when the whole topic of Black church comes up, the question becomes, what is the Black church? And
yes,
and where did it come from? Why do we even have to talk about, Black church? But there is a Black church, and it is important that we recognize that and celebrate it. The fact that there's a Black church, that African American people here in these United States can celebrate in their own form of worship. And the questions about, well, why do we have to have a Black church? Started way back, because Daddy King
absolutely
was one of those who questioned the whole idea of Black church. He said, hey, where that come from? That ain't in the Bible, and he raised those questions because he really did feel that one day, someday, that all people would be able to come together and all of that. However, we discovered, and it didn't take Richard Allen and Absalom Jones long to discover that even in the highest of religious settings, that the color of our skin mattered, and when you Dr. Matt Carter used to always say that people of darker hue are on the bottom everywhere. No matter
true that, absolutely.
No matter whether it's geography or religion or
yes,
whatever it is, people of darker hue are at the bottom. And so in many cases, we discover that the gifts of Black people were not welcomed and not used within the dominant culture and the dominant church, and thus pulling out. And we could go through a number of cities across this country, and where you find First Baptist or First Congregational or First this or that, you'll also find Second Baptist,
right?
and which used to be Colored Baptist,
the Black church,
absolutely, because it just became so necessary. And what happened with Richard Allen and Absalom Jones, that began the African Methodist Episcopal Church, also happened in Detroit. So that First Baptist, which sits right north of 8 Mile Road, is now accompanied by Second Baptist, which is downtown,
in Greektown,
down in Greektown, the Black church, and it's just been so absolutely necessary throughout history, and it's relevant for us now.
Well, I think the historical insight that you've provided for us has really given us a foundation for the continuation of this conversation. Because at this moment in our time in history as a culture and as a people, there are just a multitude of antagonistic voices and questioning voices that tend to imply that the Black church has no solidarity, or that it is in fact an invisible, non-existent entity. And so one of the first questions is people want to know, why do we euphemistically refer to what is really a wide array and a large group of churches and denominations with a multitude of theological perspectives, but yet there is solidarity in the fact that we're all of the darker hue. You know, when you talk about the AME, most people have no understanding of the history or the etymology of the acronym, and it, you know, is African Methodist Episcopal, and the counterpart, the CME, meant colored Methodist Episcopal.
At first, when
you know, over time now they say it's Christian Methodist
Christian or
Episcopal, but now they have also solidified with some of the dominant cultural organizations to form the United Methodists. And so there's still a distinction between the ones where the people who are, in terms of the organizational structure, are still Black churches. Right. And when we speak about the Black church, we're actually talking about, you know, probably a group of about 7 different disparate denominations: Church of God in Christ, the Methodist, Baptist, Southern, or American, well, not the American Baptist or Southern, but National Baptist, or the National Baptist of America, then the Progressive National Baptist. And we're talking about
assemblies of the world.
Right, and the assemblies. And so we're talking about those groups as a group collectively representing of the Black church. Now, I think the real concern for a lot of people, well, my concern, one, is that we have to educate a lot of people about the impact of the church, because the church has been vilified a lot by comedic routines, you know, and I think it's so easy to alter the mindset and the perception of people when you do it with a laugh. And I think even unwittingly, some comedians who go to church, you know, have found it good material. And so it's like among their hot 6 or their hot 5, their top 5 or top 6 jokes. But it has conditioned a lot of people to have a pretty comedic, cynical, or sarcastic view of church and ministers. Because so many of our movies, so much of the entertainment, and entertainment is definitely a direct route to affecting and impacting the way people think about some more serious issues.
Well, you know, when you and I started in ministry, you know, back in the 60s and
yes, sir.
70s, basically, ministers had a different level of respect in the community, you know, and was thought of as the go-to person,
absolutely,
in the community, and we used to say things like, even if some guys were down shooting dice, when the preacher is coming by,
they stop.
They put it away.
Absolutely,
they put that away, or put their drink away in respect and honor for preachers. But of course, all of that, you know, have changed, and like you say, some of it is because we've been, you know, the butt end of so many jokes and all of that kind of thing. And however, even with all of that, the church is still the only institution belonging that Black folks can say belong to them and that they belong to, and that they, meaning Black folk, can control and make decisions about, regardless of what anybody else thinks about it.
Oh, I agree.
And it's still, and when you go into the history of any of our families, you'll find the Black church there. You'll find the Black church has been a major influence in the way we have done things. And so much so, until some of us know, we probably wouldn't be here were it not for the influence of the Black church, not only upon our families, but upon our communities and upon the society that impacted, you know, our our communities, because we've been benefactors of the Black church, and even with all of its criticisms, and there's a lot of them, and with what we refer to as divisions within, and there's a lot of them, we still are like my family that grew up on 15th and Hamlin. You know, we could argue with each other,
Right.
you know, but don't let somebody else come in here, you know, trying to pick on either one of us, because we'll get together then. We'll take care of any outside interference. And so it's really the same for the Black church now. You know, we are different. We represent an awful lot of religious ideologies and denominations and everything else. However, when it all boils down, we know when to stand together.
Well, I think you cite a real fact, and I think that's why this conversation is so relevant, because if there was a time when we need to benefit from the historical precedents of the Black church's impact on the culture, on social policy that affect the congregations of people, and explaining to people who believe or who try to make the comparison that the Black church is a replication of the white church.
Mm-hmm.
And so if there is no reference around the country to white church, why do we continue to have this reference to the Black church? Well, there is a constant reference. It's just that the euphemistic references are different. And we refer to the collective body of believers in our community as the Black church. And but the white church is usually referred to as, you know, a white Christian evangelicals, but pretty much. When they speak of the white church, they don't usually have a reference to Catholics or other groups. And so I am here to suggest one, and I think it's important that we have people to understand that the Black church was never meant to be a replication of the white church. And so our voice in our community has more power and more impact by perception. But I'm not sure whether we have more impact and power in reality. Because in reflection on the last election, there are at least 4 million people who look like us sitting today on this porch who did not vote. Yet 85% of white Christian evangelicals are responsible for the executive in the White House returning for his second trip or for an encore. And so while we believe and we have this perception that we have a lot of power, and we do, but it's unused. You know, I'm a person who've advocated that the center of power, the axis of power in the country is the press, the pulpit, and the people. And we don't tend to reflect or flex the muscle of our power in our community as we once did, which is why I wanted to raise this conversation. Because there's no collective action we can point to now and say that the Black church is behind this. Because there are so many, I believe the distinction is so many of our leaders in the Black church now have been exposed to a continental or a more westernized theology. Their whole cosmos, their worldview is completely different than it was when the Black church was at its greatest peak of strength and power.
Well, you know, if you go back to the 1940s, 1950s, even into the 1960s, where we studied our Sunday school material, BTU material, and we had white images there as well as the white theology. All of the scholarship was German or European,
Absolutely.
and all of that lended its intellect to those materials and all that. It was not until James Cone and Gaylord Wilmore started to look at this entire situation, and
Black
saw the
theologians, by the
rise.
way, for those of you who don't know.
Yeah, you saw the rise of Black theologians and Black theology, which took the scriptures and viewed them from the lenses of an oppressed people,
Right.
and which gave another total perspective to how we see scripture and how we understand them. And so, rightfully so, a lot of our ancestors, a lot of our elders who came along during that period of time, were steeped in. Whoever went to school and received education was steeped in, German and European theology, and from people who saw scripture more devotionally,
Right.
shall we say,
Right.
than actually seeing the deeper meaning within scripture. I mean, the whole idea of the Beatitudes and Jesus saying, "Blessed are the poor."
Right.
The whole concept was revolutionary. But of course, European scholars could not see that because they never felt that. That was not their experience. And so when we are able to see scripture from the lenses of the Black experience in America, then we're able to see it really more realistically and to accept it more truthfully, because the setting of the scripture, meaning Jesus and the Jews of the New Testament era, were pretty much in a similar situation to what we're in America, the Black folk in America. They were an oppressed people. They were folk who were abused and trampled upon and taken advantage of, exploited,
Absolutely.
and all of the rest. And Jesus' words to the Jews and to people of that time, to those who were oppressed and to those who were the oppressors, can be readily understood when we look at them naturally. The late Charles Butler, who pastored the New Calvary Baptist Church in Detroit, he used to say, he says that an African American can read scripture and stumble upon more theology than most Europeans could even
I agree.
could ever even muster up, because it reflects the Black experience.
It's more experiential than theoretical.
Yeah.
It has a whole lot. I think the absence of historic moments now sponsored by the Black church is really creating a tremendous deficit in our community, and it contributes to the lack of progress, because so much has been placed upon a relationship with Christ as showing its rewards in the endowments of earthly goods, consumerism, and being a great consumer of these blessings. And blessings, are far more, and you saw my air quotes, blessings are far more, than these materialistic things that a whole lot of our people specifically have focused on to almost intoxicate themselves or inoculate themselves from the reality of the fact that America is a place that keeps changing, but it never changes. And so I think it's, it's incumbent upon church leaders and people like ourselves, but it's incumbent upon those people who are now giving leadership to a lot of huge congregations, or they have tremendous influence on social media, to understand that we have this prophetic responsibility to have people understand where we are now. Somebody has to respond to the cry of the people who are now asking us the next 4 years relative to Project 2025, Watchmen, What of the Night. And there just don't appear to be a lot of people who are ready to respond. And I'm wondering, how do we get back on track with the precedent set? And just from your own, historic comprehension, would you have a problem sharing with our viewers and those people who are going to be exposed to this, some examples, for instance, of how or some of those things that the Black church has been responsible for putting into play in our culture now, but we just wondered a long ways from that, or even feeling that we have anything to do with, because the dominant theological perspective is pervasive in our churches, because so many of our preachers now have not been forced to go to HBCUs or to seminaries that were connected with, our race, as most of the people who were a part of the Black church when it had a voice and was making a tremendous contribution to the public square as a moral critic, to touch the soul of the country. And that's not happening now.
Yeah, Parson, you're right on it. It's I'll be the first to say that material goods and all that stuff are important to our lives, having a little something.
Absolutely.
All those things. We take nothing away from that. But when we have come from the kind of background that we lived, then you know how to put all of these things into perspective. And so that having your health and strength and having family around you, being in loving, caring relationships with other people become our treasures, our riches, our wealth.
Yes, sir.
So that we want whatever God has for us.
Right.
And we're going to strive to get it. And we know that we teach our young people to prepare themselves so that they can attain greatness, whatever that may mean to them.
However they define it.
However, the truth of the matter is that there are what the Bible called those weightier matters.
Yes, sir.
That are much, much more important for us as a people. And we, as you said, we have in so many ways stepped away from them. Our pulpits have backed off from some of that. We know that we will not have another Martin Luther King Jr. We understand that. However, there are voices in our pulpits across this country and beyond that are proclaiming the truth of the gospel and are giving that prophetic and powerful word that is indeed speaking truth to power, as well as advocating for the least of these. And it is in the African American community, and specifically the Black church, that we are still struggling with some issues. But even with that, we are still considered to be liberators of the down and out and the oppressed. We understand the gospel that where Jesus positions himself in the place of the down and out.
Right.
I mean, so much until he says the way you have treated them is
how
the
you
way
treat
you
me.
treated me. You know, and so all through that, and it is James Cone, the late James Howell Cone, who in his book God of the Oppressed, who said that God is the God of the oppressed, and God is on the side of the oppressed. And if you're looking for God, if you want to know where he is, find the oppressed, because you'll find God. That we used to sing it in a song, and of course, rarely did we attach that depth of theology to it, but we used to sing, Jesus is the man I long to see.
That's right.
Can you tell me where is he? Then the rejoinder come, go down and search among the poor. I'm sure you'll find him there. Because that is what we believe, and that is what we believe that we are supposed to be doing as Christians and as a church, is liberating the downtrodden and setting captives free. You know, where Jesus said, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me, who has anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor, have sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to preach deliverance to the captives and the recovering of sight to the blind, and to set at liberty those who are oppressed. And that is the call of the church. And that is what the Black church takes on as its mantra, as its mission statement.
Well, I think we have to, and how we get back to having every African-American pastor or person who gives leadership to a congregation that's a majority African-American, to believing that that's their mantra. You see, because one of the problems is, as I perceive it, not a problem, but I think it is an impediment for the church really fulfilling and reacting or realizing its maximum potential, is based upon the fact that we don't make a connection between the lives we live and the battles we fought.
Yeah.
See, I think if people understood that you're not going to be able to continue buying a $300 or $400 or $500 Beyonce ticket for a concert if you are not given a level playing field in the application for a job. You're not going to be able to keep on getting an iPhone and all the other stuff on a firm, you know, with weekly payments, because you still can't afford it, but you want to look like you can. And all of those things are directly connected to a fight. You know, you're not going to be able to continue living in the condo where you live and having the view that you have if all of the impediments have been removed for racists to resume authority in human resource departments of every corporation. If they can now decide that we don't have a spot for you because we want our company to reflect America, if it's okay now for my corporation to look like the dominant culture, of which there's nothing in this country that deals with power, control, government, or wealth that is not 80% or more white.
That's right.
Absolutely nothing. The only thing that comes close is basketball players. They're 89% of the owners are white, and 75% of the players are Black. What another disparity.
Yeah, another disparity. I mean, and you know, we as African Americans can do some things. We can band together to make some things happen. Unfortunately, it takes outside pressure to get many of us to take advantage of something like that. But we can do it. We can do banks. We can do credit unions. We can do all of that. That the Tulsa experience from the past shows what we can do and what we can.
Yeah, the Black Wall Street legacy
it
shows us possibilities.
Show what we can do, and I bring up Dr. Cone again. I guess you can't.
Well, he's one of my heroes.
Listen,
No, I
you
appreciate
can't
him.
talk about Black church and not talk about it. But in his book, Malcolm and Martin, Dream or Nightmare, that one of the things that he said that as both of them came closer to the end of their time here on the planet, they were coming closer and closer together in their ideology. The whole idea of Martin fighting for integration, for example. The thing that he did not say, according to Cone, is that once you get it, you fight for the right to have it. But once you get it, you choose to support your own. So that Black hotels, so you fight for the right to stay in any hotel you want to, but you choose to support your own.
Well, I agree. And so the question became, number one, was understanding that the dream that Martin and Malcolm had was a nightmare for the dominant culture.
That's right.
If Martin had his way, it was a nightmare. If Malcolm had his way, it was still a nightmare. So one of the deficits of the theological perspective that has been introduced into the very lifeblood of this society is the idea that those biblical scriptures and references he referred to a few minutes ago that tend to make it obligatory for saints and Christians to be concerned about the least of these, is that the other culture has so conditioned the people who subscribe to their theological positions to believe that all of the poor people in this country are poor because it's their fault.
That's right.
And if it's their fault, then there's no reason to be sympathetic. That's how people from other dominant culture, churches and pastors can see all of the disrepair in our communities, but they don't believe it's a policy problem or a systemic problem.
Yeah.
Their religious perspective has taught them that it's our fault. And that if we were as enterprising as white people, we wouldn't have no slums. They are not being told that these neighborhoods have been set aside for various people, and we've withheld a whole lot of goods and services, so there will never be equity or equality in our community, so everybody can be happy.
Yeah. I mean, the whole thing is that the wealth gap between whites and blacks is vast.
And it continues to grow.
It continues to grow. But it is because of systemic racism and issues that have been there that did not provide a level opportunity for Black folk to keep up with society along the way. And it was George E. Johnson who gave a commencement address at Xavier University years ago. He made this simple statement. He says,
that was the soft sheen guy.
He said, he said that the back wheels of a carriage will never catch up with the front wheels moving at the same speed.
Oh, I definitely agree.
He said,
and he's right.
All you do is say, okay, we equal. Everybody got the same amount. No, that you can't leave me behind for 240 years. And then all of a sudden tell me that now we can go at the same speed. And I'm supposed to catch up.
But it's impossible.
No, it's impossible. And the system that perpetuates that is evil. And it's just that simple. And we've been living under that so that wealth gap grows instead of shrinks. And we suffer the consequences.
Well, there's a wealth gap. There's also a value gap, because the question we have to ask ourselves is, what happened when King and others fought for access? Did we want the right, or did we just want to be like the white?
Yeah.
You see, because when you raised the question earlier about King was fighting for access so we could have Black hotels, and not because we were forced,
Right.
and there were no other options or choices. In Chicago, we had the Evans, and we had the Manor House, and we had all these hotels that had to exist, the Southmore, because I don't care how big of a star you was, there was no way you were going to check into the Palmer House, not even in Chicago. You had to go to a Black hotel. But what we are dealing with now, one is the effect of what I call cultural orphans who don't feel any connection to Black before them and don't take any responsibility for the Blacks who will come after them. They just feel, I am not Black, I'm not a part of a group, I'm not in a club, I'm just a human being who happens to be Black. But this is not a society where people think you've been victimized by a genetic gamble and you just happen to be Black. The perception is that if you are the ancient study of eugenics, which talk about the inferiority against the superiority of another race, or the fallacy of the bell curve, that talks about we are naturally less than other people based on complexion and exposure to environment, et cetera, are all lies that have been built up by the larger culture by a whole lot of people with acronyms behind their names suggesting and attesting to the fact that they're supposed to be experts. And a whole lot of people who look like us have bought into this silliness and this fallacy that we are unequal and unequal, and inferior as human beings based on preference, and that we are where we are because we choose to be. And so, and if you have people who are leading the Black church who actually believe some of the stuff that they heard in the Southwestern seminaries and the other seminaries, where they're exposed to the dominant culture theological position, now they come back with the cultural inflections in their presentation of their sermons, but they are not legitimately or authentically African-American in their development, in their education, not even in their training or their nurture.
Yeah, it is similar to in slavery times where masters would only allow certain preachers to preach to slaves because they wanted to keep them in a certain position. And so now it is not about slave masters, but it is about a cultural thing that still perpetuates that same mindset and thus uses it to keep people trapped where they are, when actually there's a great amount of voices of liberation that are setting captives free, and are loosing chains and shackles for people so that our folk, can see themselves as free and see themselves with access to whatever it is that they desire to have. And it's a challenge, but in many circles we're making headway with that. Many of our schools are now, training up men and women who can stand in those pulpits and who can proclaim truth on that level, that it does in fact set captives free.
Well, I think it's critical that we continue these kinds of conversations.
Oh yeah.
Because so much of what is taking place with the knowledge of a few people has to become, wide public knowledge, so we can inspire and incite a whole new generation of people. Because I talk to a lot of people whose complexions are quite similar to ours, who believe that the days for the Kings, the Malcolms, and the Jesse Jacksons are pretty much over. And we paid this conversational compensation as an appreciation for what they did. You know, I'm always awed by all the people who would show up in a lot of major cities. Every Martin Luther King Day, and they'll buy a table for $1,000 or $2,000 to say they love King. But then everything that he touched, the organizations that he organized and left here as a reflection of himself, are all on intensive care.
Struggling to survive.
And they're struggling, and yet there are these people who once a year who say, oh, Dr. King was on it. He was the man. But everything he was saying, you were saying it's irrelevant, while the rest of the people who are in power are disassembling and deconstructing all of the benefits that you thought were permanently and indelibly a part of the Bill of Rights, the Constitution, and just the way we did business in this country. And now you see that there was this undertone, there was this hunger for a backlash. People thought Obama was the end of racism, when in fact he infused it. And he woke up the racists who never thought there'd be a chance for somebody who looked like us to be president. But you see what happened when they found out it was possible. Backlashes always come back with a vengeance. A backlash can never stop what it's reacting to, but it can fight to make sure that it never happens again. You know, we talked about liberators from our community, where in the other community, there are these people who are now becoming the repeat redeemers. The redeemers were a large, unconstructed group of white people right after Reconstruction who decided they were going to redeem the whites in the nation from this contract for 40 acres and a mule and all the other things Lincoln had promised and put into the Reconstruction platform that his vice was ready to get rid of, and which was a great part of why he was assassinated. You know, we hear the story, for instance, of the assassination of Lincoln in the Ford Theater, but I promise you, 95% of Black people don't know that his assassination was because of his stand for Black people. They thought it was just a crazy actor who had a problem with the president, when in fact he was representing all of the races of the country who had put his money in a Canadian bank so he could slip away and get it without being caught. The Confederate Army was the sponsor of Booth's killing of Lincoln. But it was about racism. But we're never told that, because the history books have been antiseptically sanitized, so you and I would have no idea that anybody white was out fighting for you to have a better life, when the whole point of his assassination was to get him out, because he was giving away the country to Black people who deserved to be slaves. And we are back at the point now where we got new redeemers who are saying the country would be better off if the people in charge all look like each other. Well, Reverend, I haven't heard them say that. Well, what do you think they're saying when they say things like, look at how good Russia runs? Ain't no diversity in Russia. Look at how good Germany runs. Look how good Hungary runs. There's no diversity. We messing up our country with diversity. That's the mantra that we have to deal with right now. And how do we get people to understand that the struggle did not end? Everything we are dealing with, and there are African Americans who look like us who are saying that all of these special accommodations divided the races, made people hate us. Well, now we're divided from the beginning because they already hated us.
That's right. And there's nothing that could be said about that except that we were already hated. And it's Carolyn Anderson in her book White Rage that continues to talk about every time there is a stride forward for African Americans, there's a white backlash.
Yeah.
And it continues to happen over and over. And we who've been around a while know when to look out for it.
Absolutely.
You know it's coming.
It's coming.
It's coming. And so now, as you well said, that there's a whole culture, there's a whole lot of people, because 47 is in the White House where he is because he is the face of what so many others have always believed and wanted.
And had the courage to say it. And he realizes
has the courage as well as the lack of smarts.
The lack of smarts, the lack of scruples.
Yeah.
Just a whole lot of lacks.
Yeah.
But, you know, moving our church toward understanding that we are not a replica of the white church. We are a necessity in that our view of the world, our theological cosmos, it is really parallel. And we're not here to replicate them. We're here to be the church, but where we stand, it don't look the same as it does. See, where we stand, we don't see it as our fault. We see it as a lack of opportunity. We see it as a plan to make sure that we don't do what they were marching and saying in Charlottesville when 47 was 45. Yeah. And he said there are good people on both sides. How can there be good people who marching and saying they will not replace us? And some people wanted to believe they were just talking about Jews. Yeah. But they're not talking about deporting millions of Jewish people. They're talking about deporting millions of brown people. Right. They're even talking about taking away the citizenship of people that are enshrined in the Constitution, that if you're born on this ground, I don't care about the status of your parents, you're a citizen. All that stuff is going away because the whole truth is we don't want to be replaced by anybody else. And when you start to understand that it's not about a struggle or a fight, it's about replacement. Right. It's not about crime. Right. Listen, 88% of the crime in white communities are white people on white people. Over 91 or 2% of the crime in black communities are black people on black people. So now, where are the immigrants? Yeah. And how did their crime level rise to such a level? We got to deport millions of people. Yeah. And then let's ask the question about all the people who come into the country with a visa and don't leave, but nobody talks about all the people in the country illegally from Europe, from Hungary, from Czechoslovakia, from Yugoslavia, from all the European countries. There are thousands upon thousands of folk who get a visa and don't go back. Right. But there are no planes dropping people off in Europe. They're dropping them off in South America. They're taking them back to India. And yes, the Indians. A whole lot of people have come here trying to assimilate the culture and starting to think and act like the dominant culture. They even treat you like the dominant culture. I mean, go into a beauty supply store and see if they are not suspicious of you, just like the dominant culture told them they should be. You're not going to put a wig in your pocket. You can't put magic shave under your arm, but they follow you around the store because they got their instructions, not from being in Asia, but from schooling from the dominant culture. And so we have people who've decided that there is nothing but just a difference in race, but we're all the same church. Our view is different. Our perspective is different. And we don't drive through our neighborhood saying, that's all our fault. The only way anybody can go home and sleep at night or preach in the face of a knee on the neck of George Floyd and pretend for a year of telepreaching that there's nothing going on outside here, but brother, we're going to get together because we are all brothers in the Lord Jesus Christ. I'm here to tell you, how can you ignore that every time somebody like me gets stopped, they get shot, and you get out saying, what's up, buddy, what did I do? And you agreed it and escorted home. And I had my parents or my family is being called because I didn't put my cigarette out. I'm now dead. Yeah. And I was in my car, but I got stopped. We live in a culture where the dominant church would not say anything, and now we have members of our own churches who are afraid or who've been told by the people who pay their salaries because they are beneficiaries of salaries from other denominations that are controlled by the dominant culture. And they've decided, I can't say anything about what's going on in my neighborhood because I won't get paid and I won't have my position with those people anymore. And I'd rather be next to the powerful than be powerful myself. Yeah. And so getting on track to follow the trail of the trailblazers in Black history for the church, for me, is so critical because I think we've got to reassume our prophetic posture. I'm so glad you joined us this Wednesday afternoon. I want to thank my guest again one more time, Dr. E.L. Brandt, for making a tremendous contribution to this conversation. And don't forget to check out my Porch Reads. I have recommended a couple of books for you to read during this month of Black History. I recommended The Black Church and the African American Experience by C. Eric Lincoln and Mamiya. And I also recommended that you would also get the second book of The Destruction of Black Civilization by Chancellor Williams, Third World Press book, and it'll bless you too. I want you to have this information as we go through Black history. Don't just talk about Black history and you're unfamiliar with Black history. Hey, I love you. God bless you. Thank you for joining us. But as the people of God, we've got to have a position that honors God's perspective on the world. I love you, and meet me again on my porch. I promise to have some iced tea or some lemonade next time when you join me on the porch for great conversation. Thank you, Dr. Branch.
Thank you.
See you next Wednesday. And don't forget, check out Loveland's Little Convos. My 4-year-old baby, she thinks she's 40. So check out her podcast. She's going to make you laugh and make you say, my goodness, what a young lady. God bless you. See you soon.